Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maricris, and for today's video I will show you how I did my makeup before I watch YouTube. So basically this is just an intro to the intro of just warning you that I'm watching Democracy Now!, which is a news independent news agent, and so one of the news that is going to be highlighted is the war that's going on in Congo, and there will be graphic violent scenes. So please, if you have kids around or if you're not comfortable with this kind of content, please click and go to another video, and hopefully we'll see you next time. But yeah, just to warn you guys, okay? Hello everyone! Welcome back to my channel. My name is Maricris, and for today's video I would like to show you how I did my makeup prior to having a YouTube channel. So now I always put on my makeup in front of the camera simply because it gives me more videos to edit and film. Especially, I don't have a lot of time, but I still love making videos, so I squeeze it in by saying, hey, I'm putting my makeup on, I have a lot of thoughts in my brain, so let me do a YouTube video. But before that, what I would do is watch and listen to Democracy Now! Whilst putting on my makeup. One of the reasons why I like to do that is because sometimes that's the only time I really get to watch or listen to the news is on the weekend when I'm putting my makeup on. And I've really just have associated makeup with the weekend, relaxing, catching up on things, you know the usual weekend that everybody has. So I figure, you know what? I'm gonna try this out. Hopefully it works. I don't know if this is gonna be posted actually, because it's kind of like an experiment thing. I've never done this kind of editing before. So let's cross our fingers and pray that this will actually work. So let's get to it. Okay, guys. Okay, I'm trying to give as much space over here for myself, so when I edit it, I can put it here. So I'm gonna put on Democracy Now! And I will do commentary, I guess, of my thoughts. Wait, you know what I'm going to do? Let me download it.
From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I just returned from covering an ethnic cleansing campaign in the Democratic Republic of Congo. During this campaign, hundreds were killed, thousands of homes burned down, hundreds of villages attacked, hundreds of thousands of people driven from their homes, either into internal exile or made refugees driven outside the country. And all of this suffering was exacerbated by neglect from the international community, and especially the America First policies of the Trump administration.
A slaughter in silence. We'll speak to journalist Nick Terse about how a brutal ethnic cleansing campaign in the Democratic Republic of Congo was made worse after the U.S. abruptly cut support for peacekeeping efforts last year as part of President Trump's America First policies. Then to Emilio Gutierrez Soto, the journalist who fled certain death in his native Mexico. He's just been released after 7 months in an immigrant detention center in Texas with his son.
Life in that concentration camp is extremely harsh. What the immigration authorities seek is to finish you off psychologically, and we're trying to resume our lives in liberty, in semi-liberty.
And then to North Dakota, where the body of Native American mother Olivia Lone Bear has been found in the bottom of a lake after a 9-month search. Her disappearance sparked renewed attention to the disproportionately high rates of disappearance, rape, and murder of Native American women across the United States. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Environmental Protection Agency said Thursday it'll freeze Obama-era fuel economy standards at 2020 levels in the latest blow by the Trump administration against efforts to curb catastrophic climate change. Under previous rules, the U.S. was on track to double fuel mileage standards to an average of nearly 55 miles per gallon by 2025. Under the new rules, automakers will be allowed to continue selling cars and light trucks in the U.S. that average about 30 miles per gallon. The Trump administration also plans to revoke California's authority to set its own tougher automobile emission standards. California Governor Jerry Brown said his state would lead 17 other states in a legal challenge against the move, tweeting, "California will fight this stupidity in every conceivable way possible." United Nations officials have condemned President Trump's rhetoric against the media. In a joint statement, UN Special Rapporteurs at the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, David Kaye and Edison Lanza, said of Trump, quote, "These attacks run counter to the country's obligations to respect press freedom and international human rights law. We're especially concerned that these attacks increase the risk of journalists being targeted with violence," unquote. Their warning came as Trump continued to assail the media. This is Trump speaking at a campaign rally in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, Thursday evening.
There has never been, and even these people back here, these horrible, horrendous people, even these people back there, look at it. It looks like the Academy Awards. There's so many. You ever see this? But they can make anything bad because they are the fake, disgusting news.
Trump's attacks came as his daughter, senior White House advisor Ivanka Trump, said she doesn't share her father's views that the press is the enemy of the American people. Ivanka Trump was speaking at an event held by the website Axios. During her interview, she also described her father's policy of separating immigrant families at the U.S.-Mexico border as a low point of her time at the White House.
Yes, that was a low point for me as well. I feel very strongly about that, and I am very vehemently against family separation and the separation of parents and children. So I would agree with that sentiment. I think immigration is incredibly complex.
In Texas, immigrant rights groups say more than 500 fathers and sons who were separated at the U.S.-Mexico border, then reunited inside a for-profit immigration jail, have launched a strike and are refusing orders from ICE and guards from the Geo Group Corporation. The fathers are reportedly refusing meals, saying they've been denied their right to apply for asylum, have not been notified about their immigration status, and that ICE officials misled them into agreeing to deportation in exchange for reuniting with their children. Their sons refused to participate in classes Thursday. This is audio of one of the fathers obtained by the immigrant rights legal support group, RAICES.
What worries me is that we are restrained from our freedom as human beings. Our children are crying. It is so bad in here. We are told that one of the detainees' sons tried to hang himself. I have talked to the other detainees, and there is a plan. We will not be eating, and everyone has agreed.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials have denied a hunger strike is taking place inside Carnes. On Thursday, ICE said in a statement fewer than 50 people had participated in a brief sit-in protest and later dispersed. Meanwhile, ProPublica reports a youth care worker for Southwest Key has been charged with molesting at least 8 unaccompanied immigrant boys in Arizona. The worker is HIV positive, prompting fears he may have transmitted the virus to the boys he sexually assaulted. In Yemen's port city of Hodeidah, bombers with the Saudi-led U.S.-supported coalition struck near the city's main public hospital Thursday. Medics say the assault killed at least 55 people while wounding 126 others. This is a survivor of the attack.
I was rescuing people when the second airstrike happened. Its impact sent shrapnel flying into my face, making me bleed a little. I couldn't feel my hand because of the shrapnel.
The latest civilian deaths came as the UN warned more than 8 million Yemenis are now experiencing extreme hunger as a result of the ongoing conflict, with millions more at risk of contracting cholera, as the U.S.-backed war on Yemen has created the world's worst humanitarian disaster. Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission has declared Emerson Mnangagwa the winner of Monday's national election. Mnangagwa served as vice president under longtime leader Robert Mugabe. He emerged as interim president after Zimbabwe's military seized government buildings and deposed Mugabe last November. Opposition parties have rejected the outcome, questioning the vote count. On Thursday, police raided the headquarters of the Movement for Democratic Change in Harare, accusing party leaders of inciting violence. The raid came as the death toll in a bloody crackdown by soldiers on Wednesday's post-election protests rose to 6. In Nicaragua, hundreds of students protested in the streets of Managua Thursday, calling on President Daniel Ortega to resign. The latest protest came as international human rights groups say more than 300 people have been killed by police and government-backed paramilitaries since anti-austerity protests erupted in April. The UN Refugee Agency says the violence has driven some 23,000 people to flee to neighboring Costa Rica, where some 200 Nicaraguans are applying for asylum each day. An international group of conservationists is warning nearly every species of lemur is under threat of going extinct as human development encroaches on their territory on the island of Madagascar. The primate specialist group reported Thursday that logging, slash-and-burn agriculture, and mining has left 105 of 111 lemur species vulnerable to extinction. In Mexico, President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador says he's preparing to ban the oil and gas drilling method known as hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. Environmental groups celebrated the announcement, with Food and Water Watch Director Winona Howder telling Desmog blog, quote, "The plan to ban fracking in Mexico represents the latest common-sense decision by a world leader to prohibit this inherently toxic, polluting practice." In Pennsylvania, an environmental activist and grandmother has been jailed for fighting a fracked gas pipeline being built in part on her own land. 63-year-old Ellen Gerhardt was arrested last week after the company Sunoco accused her of violating a court order banning her from interfering with workers building the Mariner East 2 pipeline, which will run across the state. Gerhardt has led the fight to stop the pipeline since Sunoco seized part of her land for construction using eminent domain. Sunoco is owned by Energy Transfer Partners, the company behind the Dakota Access Pipeline. Gerhardt remains in jail on $25,000 cash bail. CBS reported record revenues Thursday, exceeding investors' estimates of quarterly earnings and driving up share prices of the media company. CBS announced the earnings on a conference call that included longtime CEO Les Moonves, who's been accused of sexual assault and harassment by at least 6 women who say he forcibly kissed or touched them during business meetings and physically and professionally threatened them after they rejected his sexual advances. During Thursday's call, not a single reporter asked Moonves about his alleged sexual misconduct, instead allowing him to speak at length about CBS's earnings. The allegations against Moonves were revealed in a New Yorker investigation by Ronan Farrow that also uncovered sexual harassment claims against CBS 60 Minutes executive producer Jeff Fager. The New Yorker reports Fager made unwanted advances towards employees and protected other men accused of sexual misconduct. And in Massachusetts, Smith College has apologized to a black student who was racially profiled on campus. The student, Amu Kanute, was eating her lunch in her dormitory's common room on Tuesday when a campus employee called police reporting someone who, quote, seemed out of place. After an officer arrived on the scene and confronted her, Kanute began recording the episode, later posting it on Facebook with a statement that read in part, "All I did was be black." This is Amu Kanute speaking with CBS Boston.
It just still upsets me to just talk about it because I don't even feel safe on my own campus, and I'm away from home. I'm the first in my family to go to college. I'm doing this not only for me, but for my family, for my ancestors.
In a statement, Smith College President Kathleen McCartney offered Kanute an apology, adding, "This painful incident reminds us of the ongoing legacy of racism and bias in which people of color are targeted while simply going about the business of their daily lives," unquote. Kanute demanded Smith release the name of the staffer who called police on her. The college has so far refused. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We begin in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is facing one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. Between 1998 and 2003, the DRC suffered what has been described as the deadliest conflict since World War II. More than 5 million Congolese died. Well, 15 years after the war ended in Congo, the country is facing another massive crisis, a wave of extreme violence sweeping the DRC. Last year, 2 million Congolese fled their homes. Nearly 7 million Congolese are now internally displaced. Another 500,000 have fled to other parts of Africa. According to the United Nations, 13 million Congolese are in urgent need of humanitarian aid. The international media has largely ignored what's happening. But this week, Vice News published a shocking investigation into a recent case of ethnic cleansing where hundreds of machete-wielding militiamen swept through areas in Congo near the Ugandan border. About 120 communities were attacked, with hundreds killed, thousands of homes destroyed, some 350,000 people displaced. The violence came after the U.S. abruptly cut support for peacekeeping efforts in the Congo and elsewhere last year as part of President Trump's America First policies. For more, we're joined by Vice News contributor, author Nick Turse. His article is headlined, "A Slaughter in Silence, How a Brutal Ethnic Cleansing Campaign in DRC Was Made Worse by Trump's America First Policies and the World's Neglect." He's also author of the book, Next Time They'll Come to Count the Dead, War and Survival in South Sudan. Nick, welcome back to Democracy Now! Explain exactly what you've uncovered.
Well, I went to the Democratic Republic of Congo earlier this year to cover existing conflicts and the resulting refugee crisis. But I found myself witness to an unfolding ethnic cleansing campaign in the far east of Democratic Republic of Congo, a place called the Tori province, and specifically a region called Jugu territory. And there, the minority Hema community was being attacked relentlessly. In the time I was there, sometimes more than one attack per day on villages. There were about 120 attacks during this campaign. Hundreds were killed. Hundreds of thousands were driven from their homes. Most of them became internal exiles inside of Congo, and then about 50,000 or so were driven across the border into Uganda.
Who's doing this?
Well, it's a very murky circumstance trying to find who's exactly behind this. When you talk to most people there, they say that it isn't an ethnic conflict, which it's been portrayed as outside of the country. They say that there's an invisible hand behind it. And when you delve into that further, basically what it's meant is that powerful politico-military forces are behind this. Many people link it to President Joseph Kabila, who's stayed in office as president 2 years beyond his legal mandate. And he has there's an election coming up, presidential election in December. A lot of people think that this violence was orchestrated to help postpone that election or upend it completely.
How would it do it?
Well, they're trying, at the time that this violence broke out, the head of the Electoral Commission in the capital, Kinshasa, came out and said, if there's violence in a Tori province, then there's a good chance that we can't hold elections because there'll be too many, the population will be displaced, and we have to focus our resources on quelling the unrest there. And at the exact same time, unrest broke out in a Tori province. A lot of people thought that was too much of a coincidence to be strictly a coincidence.
I want to turn to an earlier report on Vice News tonight describing the violence in the Tori province. A word of caution to our TV viewers. Some of these images are extremely graphic.
The Lendu and Hema are two neighbouring ethnic groups who fought one another in the past. But since 2007, they've lived in relative peace. Not anymore. The Lendu militia has been targeting the Hema since December, burning villages and killing more than 250 people. Just days before we arrived in Marze village, a Lendu militia allegedly slaughtered more than 40 Hema villagers. It was one of the worst cases of ethnic violence in recent memory.
They came in with the machetes. In this village, we lost. Yes, there are many women, and among the women, many are elderly.
David Itsobwa lost 15 family members and has been investigating the massacre for human rights groups.
There were also children up to 2 years, 3, 4, up to 20 years. There's another who lost a wife and children. He has also lost a child.
Can you elaborate on this, Nick?
Yeah, this was one of the largest of the massacres. It was a village called Maze, and people I spoke to said that 50 or more people were killed there. And the killings that were going on in Congo were especially brutal. I mean, we're talking about, it's a world where war is increasingly associated with drones and smart bombs and cyber attacks, but the war on civilians that I witnessed there was carried out by militiamen who were wielding machetes, axes, bows and arrows, and spears. It was as brutal as it was merciless, and the militiamen there were attacking, women, children, the elderly, without compunction.
Tell us some of the stories of the people you met with, the horror of their limbs being chopped off.
Yeah, there was, there are so many stories that stick with me, but one, it was a family who tried to flee an attack on their village, Che, which isn't very far from Maze, which we just saw there in the clip. And the family was confronted by these militiamen on the way out of town, and 4 family members, a mother and 3 children, were killed during this. An 11-year-old girl, the eldest daughter in the family, was attacked. She was cut several times, including militiamen cut off one of her hands. She woke up and she told me that she saw bodies scattered all around, including her mother. She went over to her mother and found that her young sister, a 2-year-old, had been gravely wounded but was still alive. And she took a piece of fabric off her mother's body, wrapped up her sister onto her back, and then helped several other survivors in the village. She also found her father and eventually brought help to him. Other men who had fled the village had come back. She brought the men to him, and it saved all of their lives.
I want to go back to Vice News correspondent Aris Rossini, who visited an overcrowded refugee camp, which is home to thousands of people, mostly Hema, who fled from Lendu attackers.
This tent is filled with families who bear some of the most brutal injuries.
Can you tell me what happened to you?
They killed my wife and 3 children. They started to cut me with a machete and the child who was in my hand.
Nine Richard's 2-year-old daughter, Rachel, now has these permanent scars to her face and skull.
We were being chased.
Her older sister, 11-year-old Marve Grace, watched her pregnant mother get hacked to death.
I stopped when I saw that they were cutting my mother. But when they saw I stopped, they started cutting me too. That's how they cut my hand. Since there is still a war, I cannot go back home.
That report from Vice News, Nick Terse.
Yes, that was the family that I was speaking of, and Mave Grace was the one who saved her entire family. She saved other people from the village. She found a young boy who was gravely wounded and wandering through. She helped him. She told me that there were others that she couldn't save. She saw a boy who both of his legs were cut off, and she said she wanted to help, but she knew there was nothing that she could do. And these stories I was told again and again in village after village. I mean, it was just incredibly violent.
So what does this have to do with U.S. policy?
Well, experts that I talked to said that U.S. policy exacerbated this ethnic cleansing campaign. Because in 2017, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, pushed for and won dramatic cuts to the UN peacekeeping budget. She took to Twitter afterwards to celebrate having cut $500 million from peacekeeping efforts and said this was only the beginning.
Let me turn to Nikki Haley, speaking earlier this year.
Peacekeeping is a shared responsibility. With shared responsibility comes shared burdens and shared costs. One country should not shoulder more than 1/4 of the UN peacekeeping budget, and we look forward to a more equitable distribution of the budget among member states. Moving forward, the United States will not pay more than 25% of the peacekeeping budget. This is a cap required by U.S. law.
That's the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. Nick Terse.
Yes, these cuts were severe, But even UN officials that I talked to and outside experts said that they were manageable if they were done with some sort of orderly process. But the United States pushed for these cuts to be very severe and very fast. And because of that, the UN peacekeeping mission, I was told, had to move its forces and close down bases in a very haphazard fashion, that this had to be done very fast. Because of this, bases were shut down in a Tory province just before this violence broke out. And the people that I talked to, the experts said that this hampered the response, that there could have been a faster UN response. And again, I should mention that these attackers were armed with traditional weapons, axes, arrows, machetes. UN peacekeepers are armed with modern automatic weapons. Most people said that if there was a robust peacekeeping presence, they would have saved lives because the attackers wouldn't have been able to stand up to them.
Who supports this overall UN peacekeeping force? It's called MONUSCO?
Yes, MONUSCO is supported in large part by the United States, but other members of the international community also contribute to this force. But it was the U.S. that really led the charge to cut this budget. They said it was bloated, and they said that this was part of the America First agenda, that America shouldn't be shouldering this type of financial burden.
I mean, you think back to the history of the Congo over a century ago, when the Belgian King Leopold considered it his private fiefdom and killed, well over 10 million Congolese. Right. The symbol of that time, the cutting off of hands.
Yeah. So you're seeing that, more than a century later, the same type of violence being meted out. And, back then, the United States was the first country in the world to recognize Leopold's claim on the Congo and supported his effort. And I couldn't help but see some sort of symmetry in that.
So what are people there calling for right now? And if you could place not only the Ituri province for us within Congo, but Democratic Republic of Congo within Africa geopolitically and its significance.
Sure. I mean, the Congo is a huge country. It's about the size of Western Europe. So it's massive.
All of Western Europe.
All of Western Europe would fit inside the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's in the heart of Africa, a tremendously large place, poor country in terms of GDP, not poor when you look at the resources under the ground. There's $24 trillion worth of mineral wealth beneath the ground in Congo. So there are always a lot of multinational corporations are interested in getting into Congo, but Congo has been plagued by rulers who don't leave power and recurrent violence over the years.
At this point, your work in Africa has gone on for years. You wrote a book about South Sudan. You've written about, in the last year, the U.S. presence in Africa overall. Can you talk about that, even as it cuts aid to UN peacekeeping forces?
Yeah, the United States has had a robust military presence across the continent. It looks like that may be scaled back in the coming months as the U.S. pivots more towards near-peer competitors like Russia and China. But actually, I just checked in with U.S. Special Operations Command, and the number of commandos operating in Africa is the same as it was last year. So there have been talks about cuts, but we haven't seen them yet. The United States has this presence as the idea behind it is counterterrorism. They haven't been all that successful. There's actually a proliferation of terror groups across the continent, and missions over the years haven't been all that successful. The United States, just a couple of years ago, was heavily involved in Central Africa, including a small presence in Congo. It was aligned against Joseph Kony's Lord's Resistance Army. After close to $1 billion spent, the United States was unable to capture or kill Kony. The LRA goes on, but that U.S. presence has faded.
And you've written in your previous work, more U.S. commandos are deployed to Africa than to any other region of the world except to the Middle East.
That's right. It's been rapid growth since 9/11. At that time, about 1% of U.S. commandos deployed overseas were in Africa. and now it's running about 16%, more than any place other than the war zones in the greater Middle East.
From your travels there, what do you think needs to be done right now in the DRC?
Well, it's humanitarian aid is what people are asking for. And, it wasn't just these UN peacekeeping cuts that caused a tremendous amount of suffering there, but international aid to Congo has been dropping precipitously over the last years. If you look at last year's numbers, the average Syrian in need of humanitarian assistance received $305. The average Congolese in need of it received about $62. Now, I don't begrudge Syrians in need any amount of money, but there's a real disparity there. And experts that I talked to said, people just don't care about the Congo.
Nick Turse, thank you for being there and for...
Okay, guys, oops. This is just a practice run. I might upload this, I might not. I have to go now. I didn't even do blush. Oh my god, look at that. Okay. I didn't even do blush. I wanted to... Oh well. I wanted to try out this concept. I don't know how it's gonna work. I want to practice the editing, so I'm not gonna watch the whole entire video of it. What was I gonna say? Yeah, I'm not gonna watch the whole entire video because it's 1 hour long. This is just a practice run, so I don't even know if I'm gonna post it or not, but it's just so freaking sad what's going on in the Congo. It's almost forgotten, I was getting goosebumps when I was listening to those stories. Am I on the way off the side? Okay. Anyways, to really show how I did my makeup or something. This is how I used to wear my makeup before I had YouTube. I'm sorry, I get really down when I hear this kind of news, and so like my energy would just be like all the way low. It makes me really sad for the Congolese people, and hopefully because of this expose that the US government will change their mind about sending funds to the UN peacekeeping commission, and also hopefully that the rest of the world can say, hey, if the US government is not pitching in, then maybe we as the world who doesn't want these atrocities happen to our fellow human beings, that maybe we should all put in that money, because it's just horrible. Like, I was watching that and I was getting goosebumps, and it's just like, ugh. Like, how many times I've cried listening to the stories, but I cannot be ignorant, so I need to know. So I just wanted to share with you guys, and I think that yes, I'm putting on makeup, but all these things, we're all human, and all these issues are all intersectional, and we are all connected. So hopefully we'll be learning from one another. Okay, if you like this kind of video, subscribe. I'm sorry, I'm just so like down with that news. It hurts me, and so yeah. So if you like this kind of video, subscribe and hit that like button for more videos like this that are just sharing information with one another, and comment down below what is your favorite news agency, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye guys.